So, I love the art style of Elden Ring's map, and what I especially love are the little design flourishes that you can find along the coastline. Swirling maelstroms give the impression of a sea in upheaval, and the broken ships dotted around the place only reinforce that idea. Now, we could go into speculation on who owned these ships and small vessels, but what I find far more interesting than the lore in this case is actually what inspired these sorts of design flourishes on Elden Ring's map. Which brings us to this, Paolo Forlani's 16th century maps of the world, which feature outlandish creatures and ships that look really similar to the designs in Elden Ring's map. Now, there are no sea monsters found in Elden Ring's maps, in the current version at least. In the older versions of the map, however, there were tons of monsters. So what you're looking at now is a much older map of Limgrave, something that was data mined by Chinese players from an earlier version of the game. And this one has a mermaid taken straight out of Paolo Forlani's, as well as creatures lifted straight from a ton of other maps as well, confirming these ancient inspirations and giving us a ton more to discuss besides, because all of this text is actually readable. So originally posted on Bilibili, a Chinese video sharing website, a channel whose name I don't want to mispronounce posted a video covering the script found on the original map. And on this original map, they found Chinese characters from the Yi script, and despite that language kind of fading into obscurity, the group was able to translate the Yi characters through a series of events detailed in the video below and translated by the YouTube channel YYSTV. So to break some of this down, some of the text separates the seas surrounding the Weeping Peninsula into 4 distinct seas, the North, East, South, and West seas, but much of the older text is actually written as warning. Here, for example, it says, "Multiple witnesses to a sea serpent, danger," and we do indeed see these serpents spliced from other medieval sea charts and inserted straight into the map. And do you remember the Bridge of Sacrifice that leads to the Weeping Peninsula? Well, in this earlier version, the channel that runs under it is called the Kraken Channel, suggesting that it'd be a very dangerous route for any ships to take. The Kraken itself is found elsewhere on the map as well, with this image that is roughly taken from an engraving made in 1801. So, to be clear, I'm not suggesting that these sea monsters are canon in Elden Ring's lore or anything like that. If anything, it's actually more the opposite. These were only ever intended as internal references for From Software, and the fact that no sea monsters survived onto Elden Ring's actual map means that maybe From Software found these inclusions to be distracting, since they never really drew any new monsters of their own. So in the end, we were left with these boats, small excerpts of blurred text, and we're left with this story of an older map that inspired it all. And I'm a huge sucker for this older version of Elden Ring's map because it's such a rare, fascinating glimpse into a past aspect of the game's development. The reason that data mining and early assets are so intriguing to the Souls community is because we don't really hear much from the developers when it comes to the development process. They usually just give a few interviews at release time and then they disappear, heads down on the next project. Miyazaki has even gone on record saying that he probably won't end up playing Elden Ring because, and I quote, "I just don't enjoy playing the games that I've made in the past. Once they're done, they're done." Now, George R.R. Martin was involved this time as well, though unfortunately he hasn't gone into much detail about the characters and story that he created either, leaving us all wondering what he created and what was tweaked by Miyazaki and the team. I know George doesn't really play video games, but it'd be really cool if Namco got him to watch a playthrough to see reactions to his characters, or I'd love to see him comment on his creative process in a bit more detail. But anyway, in a recent interview with Stephen Colbert, George did mention one tidbit that helps us with Elden Ring's timeline.
But they made it clear that Elden Ring was going to take place in, let's say, the present of their game universe. But what they wanted me to write was what happened like 5,000 years before that that totally screwed up the world so that the present was really messed up.
So, assuming that this wasn't like an offhand comment, now we at least know that a period of 5,000 years might have passed between the shattering and the events of the game. For number 4, as many of you know, in an earlier version of the game, the character Vike played a more important role, and it's actually him that we see on the cover art of Elden Ring. He's almost like the chosen one, the main character that was supposed to become Elden Lord, so much so that he's even featured on the game's cover, but something went tragically wrong with his story, and our character takes over instead. It's cool to me that he's still represented as the main character. That's how close he got to becoming Elden Lord, you know? But Vike isn't the only recognizable element on the Elden Ring cover. For example, here are 2 divine towers. Here is a statue you might recognize. It's the one that always stands atop heroes' grave sites. Here is a collapsed dragon, like the one in Godric's boss room. And surrounding Vike in his fingerprint set, I've also found 5 bodies that wear 5 very familiar armor sets. There's the Royal Remains set here, the Champion set here, you can tell because of the red little tassel, the Carrion Knight set, the Iron set, although it could also be the Kaiden set, I think, and the Eccentric set that Jaren wears right here. If there's anything else I'm missing in this image, please let me know. So for number 5, there's an item called Soft Cotton that reduces the amount of fall damage you take in Elden Ring, as if you'd ever need it. But anyway, so Soft Cotton is a craftable item, and it only requires a Rowa fruit and a smoldering butterfly to create. When I saw this recently, I wondered, why the butterfly? And then, after reading the item descriptions more closely, I realized that the cotton is created by splitting open Rowa fruit in a particular manner. So, since the smoldering butterfly is involved, this particular manner must involve burning the Rowa fruit, popping it open to release the soft cotton. This could also explain why humans are unable to ingest Rowa fruit, as stated by the Rowa raisin description, since it's essentially just cotton on the inside. Next, I want to talk about Finger Maiden Therolina, this character that appears at the Radahn festival. Upon interacting with her, you'll notice she doesn't talk, she only bows. This is kind of strange, but it gets weirder when you consider her spirit item description. It reads, "Spirit of a finger maiden who never met the tarnished she was meant to guide, uses healing incantations and holy water pots, but she is not a fighter by nature and is ill-suited to battle. A maiden without a tarnished without a maiden, and yet no guide to bring them together." So, why would Therolina, who is ill-suited to battle, appear at Radahn Festival, which is entirely about celebrating battle? Well, what if she was sent here? Therolina is actually one of Seluvis's puppets, and here, crumpled in a heap in Seluvis's basement, is Therolina herself. So, in a similar way to how Ranni sent Blythe and yourself to kill Radahn, it seems like Ranni might have instructed Seluvis to assist us here as well, leading to him sending Therolina as a puppet in his stead. And as ill-suited to combat as she supposedly is, she probably wouldn't have sought out this fight herself. She does cast healing spells for allies, which makes her the perfect ally to be sent to this battle, in a way. Speaking of spirit summons, did you know that you can summon Yura to help you against Flying Dragon Agheel? Few people know about this because the requirements for getting his help are kind of absurd. First you have to defeat Bloody Finger Nereus with Yura's help, and then speak to him after the battle in this dark area where he's easy to miss, and then he'll warn you to stay away from the lake. But if you blatantly disregard this and fall in battle against Agheel, you have to die here, you can return to Yura, who will scold you for ignoring his advice, and then he'll come to terms with the fact that you're going to fight the dragon anyway. And then Yura's summon sign will appear on subsequent attempts at Agheel. So considering all of this, considering that you have to die to Agheel and then seek out Yura as if you knew he would have more dialogue for you, that last requirement really is a huge contributing factor towards people missing his sign, even after several playthroughs. One thing you might have noticed in subsequent New Game Plus playthroughs is your newly gained ability to run through most slowing substances, such as the poison swamp in the Shaded Castle, the rivers of rot in the Halig Tree, and the lava in and around Volcano Manor. You can move freely through these substances without any penalty to movement speed or roll invincibility, but only if you've progressed to New Game Plus. There are some instances where you are still slowed down, like the blood puddle attacks from the sanguine noble enemies, or when you're encumbered by slug spit attacks, but outside of enemy attacks, this affords you a much faster run-through of certain areas that would have been a much longer chore to navigate in New Game. So I'm not sure if this is an intended feature of New Game Plus, but it is a welcome one. For the next secret, did you know that some chest pieces actually have hoods, and that these hoods can fit over certain headwear? These are the astrologer robe, the perfumer robe, and the black knife armor, and you can combine these with the blood-soaked mask, the altered Nox swordstress crown, the eccentric's hood, and the fingerprint helm. My favorite of these is the black knife chest with the eccentric's hood, which is the new fashion for my black knife build that I talk about in this video, by the way. And an honorable mention also goes out to the Gravekeeper and Rotten Gravekeeper cloaks, which have a separate ability to display the hood over the regular or Rotten Gravekeeper helms. Next, deep below the Ainsel Well and sealed within the yellow annex tunnel lie the Astel, these bosses that have great power over gravity. But it seems like that power isn't just limited to them. You can actually harness that power in certain caves as well, using it to give the Wing of Astel weapon a little boost. So the heavy attack and the Ash of War on this weapon both buzz with this electric hum when they're used in locations that house one of the monsters. The specific location that this unspoken power-up occurs in are just past the Ainsel River Sluice Gate, the Ainsel River Main, and the Yellow Annex Tunnel. On top of this, the Wing of Astel does 20% more damage to gravity-type enemies in general. Next is regarding the Wandering Mausoleum enemies. Did you know that they have a bedtime? If you wait for just the right time of night around the Wandering Mausoleums, they actually stop stomping and just don't move at all, giving you the perfect opportunity to clean up around their legs without worrying about being crushed by their movements. They seem to take this nap around the late night time on the in-game clock, and they continue it until the last ray of the morning sun touches the dial. I've only noticed this happen once, and it's pretty rare. There's a deeper breakdown of the time system here on a video by Leviathan, where he notes that late night can only be reached after surviving 22.5 minutes through nightfall without dying, meaning it is somewhat of a rare point of day to reach while playing the game. You should check out Leviathan's channel for tons of secrets like this as well. But before I go on, I want to give a brief shout out to Displate, as it is almost Christmas and you might still have time to pick up some neat gifts for yourself or someone else. So for a limited time, you can order with the link below in the description during their Xmas sale and get 20% off if you order 1 or 2 Displates, or 30% off if you order more than 3. On my store alone, I currently have 6 designs that I'm really proud of. For example, there's Convergence, and there's the Painted World, which are full of hundreds of Souls references that will get you close up and looking at the finer details, which is really fun. There's the Firekeeper's Apprentice, there's the Guardian of Moonlight, to remake a Demon Soul. So yeah, Displates are high quality prints, they're really easy to mount as well. They have a sticky magnet system that means there's no need to drill into and damage your walls. So again, please click the link below to support the channel and get some cool art in return. And speaking of art, these next few secrets are based on the official Elden Ring art books that just came out, and as always these books give us a look into the concept art behind the design of these games, showing weapons, characters, and environments in gorgeous new detail. So one thing I couldn't help but notice was this, on page 222 of Volume 1. It reveals that in an earlier concept, the Forge of the Giants wasn't a giant dish, it was instead a giant pot. And honestly, I kind of love it. The design here is a bit more memorable and really playful in that way that so many From Software designs often are. And I remember reading speculation that the giant lid that the fire giant wields might be like a sort of lid for the forge, so I wonder if maybe the forge having a pot lid originally is kind of in support of that idea. And speaking of a forge, take a look at this, found on page 356 of Volume 1. It's a piece of concept art featuring Blacksmith Hugh in what is very clearly one of the abandoned shacks that we find all throughout Elden Ring. And unlike the giant pot piece of concept art, there is in-game evidence of Blacksmith Hugh appearing in this shack, and not at the Round Table Hold. We learn this from a cut NPC called Gilbert. This character didn't make it into retail, but his voice lines would move on to Yura, and his visual design would be assigned to Witch Hunter Jaren. But here, near the seaside in Limgrave, this NPC once told you where to find the nearby blacksmith.
Well, there's something you ought to know. There's an aberration of a blacksmith past the checkpoint that leads to Stonevale. He doesn't seem to think much of anyone or anything, but oddly, he's willing to smith weapons for Tarnished.
The checkpoint he's referring to is this, the Scavenger's Shack that stands right before Stormvale. Here, you could have once had your weapons upgraded, and then I assume Hugh might have come back to smith for you at Round Table Hold. But a part of Hugh's story now in retail is that he's chained to the Round Table Hold, so I wonder if this story element prevented him from appearing at the Scavenger's Shack. Regardless, cool detail, and shout out to Sekiro Doobie on YouTube, who noticed and showcased this long ago. And the award for the most bizarre piece of concept art can be found here on page 148 of Volume 2. So, we always knew that the flame chariots were manned by someone sitting at the back. You can see that in-game. But this is new. So supposedly, the wheels are powered by people. One person for each wheel, in what must be a kind of claustrophobic hell. It's kind of nightmare fuel, honestly. And speaking of fuel, this picture actually explains why the chariot explodes when you do a plunging attack from above. The head is full of flammable oil, and your strike here would completely disrupt the piping that channels all of this to the flamethrower. Before I go, I just want to say I love all the design workbooks of From Software's games. Some images just convey so much like tone and atmosphere, and often a lot of that is lost when these places are rendered in-game, or it's changed at least. So these are excellent collector's items, and they're very hard to get and very expensive if you don't buy them at launch. So think about picking up a copy now before it gets too late. I spent hundreds on the older Design Works books, and yeah, I regret not getting them all at launch. Link below in the description, right under the link to my Displates if you're interested in picking up even more Souls-inspired art. But as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.